Welcome to LaFrance International Evangelical Voice. Today, we want to introduce to you with the foundation of the Christian faith. Someday we will talk or we will study with you about the sovereignty of God. That is, who God is. How can He be known? What does He like? And what does He do? Today we will talk to you about the what does God do in terms of His work of creation and providence. Now, let's start about what does God do. As you know, God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, for the manifestation of the glory of His eternal power, wisdom, and goodness, in the beginning to create all things out of nothing. The Latin word is ex nihilo, whether visible or invisible, in the space of 6 days. Genesis tells us, chapter 1, verses 3 to 5, tells us clearly that God's first creative word called forth light in the midst of the primeval darkness. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning. That's what the first day. So in other words, light is necessary for making God's creative works visible and life possible. In the Old Testament, we see that light is also symbolic of life and blessing. Job was in distress. He said so many things because he couldn't understand his distress. And in his third chapter, in verse 20, this is what he said. He asked himself a question and saying, "Why is light given to those in misery, in life to the bitter of soul?" He could understand what it is, because it was the life. Life first is saw the light of God in the midst of misery. That's why he said that. In his 33rd chapter, beginning with verse 28 through 30, he went on to say that God redeemed my soul from going down to the pit, and I will live to enjoy the light. God does all these things to a man twice, even 3 times, to turn back his soul from the pit, that the light of his life may shine on him. Yes, in day 2, to separate water under from water above. In Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8, God said, "Let us create a sky," which literally means stretched out like hammered metal. Then He said again, in the midst of waters, He divided the water below from the water above. And He said, "Let's continue making the firmament." And He hammered them. And that's for the second day. it's important for you to understand what God does do. He did all these things for a reason, including all these things. So he goes on, or he went on continue things after things, because he wants to do things for us. To continue demonstrating his power and wisdom, in the third day, he founded the sea. And he said in chapter 1, verses 9 through 13. Let's read the Bible to see what it says in chapter 1, verses 9 through 13. Read with me Genesis 1, verses 9 through 13. This is what it says in the Bible. Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and he gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plant, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to various kinds. It was so. The land produced vegetation, plant, bearing seed according to the kind, trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to the kind. And God saw it was good. And there was evening and there was morning. That's for the third day. He created all these things in the third day. It's important for you to understand why God did all these things. And we read in Genesis, in Isaiah 40, verse 26. Because people are afraid of light. It's important for you to understand why God did all these things. And in the fourth day, God created the sun, the moon, and stars as object of sign. We find that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 through 18. Some people are afraid of these things. But Isaiah said, no, don't be afraid of these things. In the contrary, this is what Isaiah said. He said in chapter 40, verse 26, he said, the sun and the moon in all this time are light givers to be appreciated, not powers to be feared, because the true God made them all. God is the one who made all these things. He said, don't be afraid of this thing. God created all these things in the fourth day. And then, in the fifth day, Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 to 21 tells us God continued to create things. This time, he created every living and moving things with which the water steams and everything that flies. So the bird, he created everything. And also, read to yourself in Genesis 20 to encourage you. Read the Bible. Read to yourself Genesis 20, Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 to 23. You will find out. So, God went on to continue to create things. In 6 days, let me read to you chapter 1, verses 24, and 25 to see what it says. In the 6 days, God created the livestock. The land produces creatures according to the kinds. Livestock, creatures that move along the ground, wild animals, each according to its kind. It was so. God made the wild animals according to the kind, the livestock according to the kind, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to the kinds. And God saw it was good. It was good. It's important for you to understand what God does do. He created all these things in 6 days. And to understand that, so you have to know in the beginning of chapter Genesis, as we just give you a review, a brief overview of Genesis, we find that a statement origins of the area of meaning, purpose, and the relationship of all things that God created. The chapter makes 3 main points. First, and most obvious, it teaches that God stands in the beginning of all things, is himself, the one through whom all things came into existence. Nothing else but God is the one. The scientists can say whatever they want to. It's impossible for them to explain how things came to be in. But the Bible says clearly God is the one, or was the one, who created all these things. The chapter captures this eloquently in the first word. In the beginning, God. At the very beginning, then our thought is directed to the existence and the nature of this God. The second major point of Genesis is that the creation was according to an orderly unfolding of the mind and purpose of God. That is, it was a step-by-step progression marked by a sequence of 6 significant days. The question that I would like to ask you is, or are the following: is a sequence of Genesis 6 days account to be compared with the sequence of the so-called geological periods? Second, do the fossils substantiate this narrative as the scientists claim to be? How long are the days? 24 period? A 24-hour period? Or indefinite ages, according to the scientists? Because it's possible for scientists to claim that. Faith is nothing for scientists. Therefore, they have to come up with all these strange things. Perhaps, most importantly, does the Genesis account leave room for evolutionary development guided by God? Or does it require a divine intervention and instantaneous creation in this case? In addition, there are several significant points at which a unique action of God to create in a special sense seems to be mark of the powerful Hebrew word, bara. The Hebrew bara rendered created, and also the verb bara also meaning to create out of nothing, which means the activities describes is therefore a prerogative of God. Thus, the whole creation was a random, but rather a result of direct guidance of God. And the third point of the Genesis account of creation is God's moral pronouncement upon what he has done. It appears in a repeated phrase, "And God saw it was good." God's pronouncement upon the goodness of the rest of the creation came before we were even before made. And that means that a tree, to give an example, is not good only because we cut it down and made it a house out of it, or because we can burn it in order to get it heat. It is good because God made it and pronounced it good. It was good because life was given at the beginning. God spoke, everything appeared. Like everything else, creation conformed to God's nature. There's nothing they can say. It is impossible for scientists to explain things. Nothing can be existed because it has to be demonstrated mathematically, scientifically. Because the universe, the world cannot be explained mathematically, therefore it doesn't exist. But biblically speaking, God is the one who created everything. Whether you believe or not, scientists, you have no choice. You may come up with billion of years with the strange theories, but those theories cannot be proved. Because God can be proved mathematically, scientifically. So God doesn't exist for you. You come up with all these million years, but you have no choice. Have to believe. Faith is meaningless for you because it cannot be proved mathematically speaking, but you have no choice. Next time, we will continue on to explain how after God created everything else, then God created human beings. In the same 6 days. In the 7th day, God rested, but in the same 6 days, He created everything else. And in the next program, we will speak about how He created man. You scientists, you may be unable to explain things according to science, but you have no choice. All you have to do, give yourself to God. Put your faith in Him. That's the only one way. You can trust God by faith. You cannot trust God by your explanation, by scientific research. It's impossible to explain things. God cannot be proved mathematically. God cannot be proved scientific speaking. It cannot be proved by faith and by a relationship with God, by a relationship with Christ. That's why it's important for us to explain things step by step. Next time, we'll cut you more. Thank you. And as you can tell, this program was bought by the LaFrance International Ministries. And we want to talk more and more about that next time and to spread the word, to evangelize the word. Thank you. Is it important to hear what I say? To read what I say?